Okay, so we're going to get started and feel free again just to keep chiming in on the chat. But so good to see some familiar faces here. Just to welcome you today to a very special webinar. So I'm Kat Caban. I am the head of school of one of Vivi's newest campuses at Carnegie Hill. And I've been with Vivi a couple of years now, so quite a long time, but I'm thrilled to see so many families I know just joining in this webinar today. I'm also so happy to be joined by Mariel Benjamin, a licensed clinical social worker and director of groups at Cooper Parenting. She's an incredible resource who has been a guest at many of our Vivi webinars, and we always learn so much from her. Today, she's going to talk about one of parents' favorite and maybe most frustrating is bad habits.
Yeah.
I'm the mom of a toddler who has some of her own bad habits, such as thumb sucking. Um, but I'm also an early childhood educator. So I hear from parents all the time who are trying to solve for some of the more frustrating things they're experiencing with their children today: bedtime procrastination, pacifier obsession, even nose picking. Today, we're going to get to the bottom of this and see why these behaviors happen. What can we do to stop them, or even if we need to? So I'm going to let Mariel jump in, introduce herself in a minute. But for those of you who are kind of unfamiliar with Vivi, I just want to give you just a little quick overview of what we do. So Vivi is on a mission really to reinvent childcare and early learning for today's families, right? We're here for today's working families. We currently have 11 campuses in and around New York City, Westchester, and our campuses specialize in early learning and care for children from 6 weeks to 5 years old. We also partner with employers of all sizes to bring childcare and early learning to their working parents as a benefit. At Vivi, we truly believe it's our mission to support the whole family, and not with just high quality learning and care, but also with education and resources for those early years, which is why we're hosting this conversation today. So a couple more things. We're just going to go over a few logistical things and then we'll dive right in and I'll let Mariel take over. Just want to say that I appreciate that many of you are here today. So thank you so much just for kind of taking the time just to join us. I know so many of you have things to do, so just grateful that you can attend today's webinar. We've got about 45 minutes together. Mariel's going to use the first 30 minutes to run through her strategies, tips, and then we'll go through some questions. The chat function is open, so feel free to drop in a line. Finally, I just want to acknowledge that this really is a huge topic. So we're going to focus on giving everyone at least one practical tool that will help you feel a little more for what's prepared coming your way. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mariel.
Thanks so much, Kat. Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be back with the Vivi family and to see you all. I actually can't see any of you because I can only see my slides, but I know you're there and I'm very excited. I am Marielle Benjamin. If we have not met before, those are the humans that I am responsible for. I'm the co-founder of Cooper. Our mission at Cooper is really just to take the science of early child development and make it super practical for parents to access and use in their everyday life. And we do that with talks like these in a group setting. If you're interested in joining like a monthly recurring group on child development where you can ask all these questions, or in one-on-one sessions, reach out anytime if you're interested in more about Cooper. Today, we're going to really talk about what we're calling bad habits. They're not all habits and they're not all bad, is going to be the big disclaimer from the top. We're going to go through sort of the why we see these behaviors in toddlers, why we're not so worried about most of these behaviors, and why some of them might actually be good for you. We are going to end on like a laundry list of habits that we think you might be experiencing, but I'd love to hear others if there are some that we neglect today. And as Kat mentioned, I want to make sure you leave with what feels like a really practical strategy to take on how to address that habit, or whether or not you need to address the habit at all. So we're going to start a little bit with self-regulation, which many of you will have heard of self-regulation before, but it's basically your ability an incredibly important executive function skill. One of the most important things that our prefrontal cortex does And our prefrontal cortex is helping us to regulate across three different planes at any time. So, our ability to regulate our behaviors, our ability to regulate our feelings, our ability to regulate our actions in that moment. So, we're doing all of these things at the same time. We are taking in all of the stimulation coming from our environment, and we are figuring out what we are going to do with it. It is developmentally appropriate, which is always the thing that you say to parents, and it's like, yeah, it's still annoying, but it is developmentally appropriate for toddlers to struggle with self regulation. Your prefrontal cortex is in development until your 20s. So many of us are struggling with some of these regulation skills for a very long time. And you may know a lot of adults out there who seem like they have pretty poor self regulation. And that is because this is an ongoing process. We're going to hope that there's always the growth potential to improve our self regulation. But for our toddlers, their brains just aren't capable of doing all of the regulation that you can. And why? Well, I really like to think of like big wills and weak skills. They have all of the same feelings that you do, all of the same reactions, and their nervous system does not have the skills it needs to filter those, respond.
We might have lost Mariel a second, just for awareness. So Mariel's actually streaming in from the West Coast in California right now. They're going through a power surge. We're gonna give it a minute, see if she can join us again.
We were talking in the middle of self-regulation and why it is so hard to do. Thank you so much. I also wanted to mention control. So the battle over control is developmentally appropriate for your children right now, which is to say they would so desperately like to control and be in charge of their environment, and they have absolutely no ability to do that. They cannot control for themselves all of the things that they wish they could. And so we see that struggle around impulse control and self regulation because it is just so hard for them to accept, as somebody put in the chat early, that you get to decide when it's time to leave the playground, that you tell them what to do, that you decide what their day looks like. Um, oh, that's great. No, we can advance. Thank you. You're predicting me already, Jessica. I appreciate it. So when we think through, we are managing our thoughts and feelings to enable goal directed actions. We are needing to get ourselves together in order to do something else. That includes things like focusing and maintaining our attention. Regulating your attention at any time and place means what you're focusing on, what you're giving that attention to. Really, for our children, it's real hard work for their brains to figure out what they are attending to in any moment. Then it means regulating those emotions, that stress, and then what they're going to do with it. We're going to get on the next slide into this lizard wizard brain, but this is really, really hard work to be able to do this. Will you go back for 1 second? I'm so sorry. I'm very confusing. And then we're also going to take that information and we're going to say, well, what in my experience has happened before? What do I do with it? Your toddlers have no context. So they don't know what's happened before. They can barely remember what's happened last week for them. And they certainly don't have the benefit of 20 or 30 years of experience with something. And then the final area we're thinking about around self regulation is how we can have sustained positive social interactions. So we can understand that social cues. We get that picking your nose in front of all of your friends maybe isn't the best thing to do, or that if you hit them constantly and bite them, they probably don't want to spend time with you. It's actually the translation to understanding our actions' effect on others, and then how we can have those pro social behaviors, which is what we call it in the development world. Okay, now I'm ready for wizard and lizard. Thank you so much. So you might have heard lots of different analogies for how you explain sort of your dysregulated and regulated brain. I happen to love wizard lizard and I did not make it up. So just full disclaimer. The idea is that when you are at your lizard brain, you are really on fight, flight, freeze response. You don't have a lot of other choices. That's your limbic system. It's your brain stem. It's when we were lizards, really what your choice was to respond to. And you are biologically designed to feel things before you think them. And I really want to point that out because that is self preservation. That is what kept us alive all of this time. If there was a saber toothed tiger on the edge of a cliff coming to eat us. We needed to run. I think you run when a tiger comes to eat you, but not sure. We needed to run faster and first before we could assess what the threat was, figure out where we were, take a moment, do a little comparison, right? We don't have time for that. And so we are meant to feel first and have that biological response. And that's our nervous system firing as it should. The problem is that as it floods our amygdala with those feelings, we need that other brain, that wizard brain, which makes us a human, that prefrontal cortex, to turn on. And that helps us do all of the higher order thinking, like regulating and saying, I don't think that is a saber-toothed tiger. I think that's just a shadow, right? Or that we're controlling and saying, hey, the last time that saber-toothed tiger came, there was this big fence there. And so he couldn't actually get close to me. It's doing all of that critical thinking and all of that regulation that is very hard to access in the first moment that you have the feeling. So I always think about it as a delay. We know that our kids are going to feel first, as we do. And what at any time we're trying to target is how many seconds it takes for that other brain to click in. So we see a huge reaction, and how can we call on them to get that wizard brain into action to think of something else to do? And a lot of the behaviors we're going to talk about today happen in the lizard brain. So, in my totally reactive brain where I need to soothe myself, I'm going to do something soothing. In my totally reactive brain, I might hit somebody or bite them. In my totally reactive brain, I cannot listen to instructions from a teacher or a parent, even if they make a lot of sense, right? I can't control how I react. So, what we're actually looking at is when is that servicing us? And when do we need to help our kids move over to that wizard brain and make a better decision? Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so this is going to take time. As I mentioned, you're in development for the prefrontal cortex. Some of you may even be in development into your 20s. Children will begin to understand rules before they can follow them. So it looks often when you're talking to a 3 and 4-year-old like they get it, like they should totally get it. We've talked about why that's not a great idea. They repeated to me back why it wasn't a great idea. I asked them, are you going to do this when we go there? No, I'm definitely not going to do that. And then they can't follow any of the rules. That is what we expect from them, but that's the developmental order. They understand it, and it's not enough yet to change their behavior or to work on those impulses. And then the last thing I just want to say is that our expectations of our children are very often out of sync with what they're capable of developmentally. And this happens to all of us. We start thinking like, hey, you seem like you get things, you're talking, you're walking, we've got all of these skills. Like you should just know this, right? You should just know that you don't do that in public, or that that's gross, or that that's what's making you sick, but they don't. And so it's really important to keep reminding yourself. I always say, like, feel just like a scooch sorry for them that they can't do any of these things, so that you can have a little bit more empathy when you look at some of these behaviors. And of course, your own annoyance with them matters. But when we can understand that they really can't do better or do differently, it can help us just take the temperature down on how wild we need to go about something. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. I hope this phone screen situation is working okay. But Kat, shout out if something is amiss. I want to throw in temperament because, as many of you will know, not every child is affected equally by issues like this, right? So some kids need more soothing and need more support. Other kids seem to have huge reactions in places and need that kind of calming. Other kids feel like they're easygoing and they just make you feel great about yourself when really you're doing nothing, but they're just kind of walking through the world easily. And that is what we call temperament, which is to say we all walk through the world in our own unique way. We all receive the signals of the tiger and other things through our own nervous system. And some of us are a little bit more of what we call the big reactors. If you're on Instagram, you are probably getting messages about big reactors, deeply feeling children all the day long. This is something where we are at this moment in time very, very interested in these kids who have big feelings. And why? Well, these might be our more sensitive kids. They might be our more delicate flowers in the garden, right? They need a little bit of that sunlight, water, perfect formula to help them thrive. They are characterized by having sort of over the top reactions. Like, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong color cup. Is this really like we're laying on the ground, losing our mind because it was the wrong color cup? Like disproportionate to this situation with great intensity. And especially in public, it can be harder for parents to manage them. So, of course, we need different strategies for kids who feel like they're in these big reactions. But what this is, when we look in child development, this is self regulation. This is that their nervous system is heightened in its response to perceived threats. So, whether we're talking about sensory input, which can definitely be a part of these big reactions, or we're just talking about having these more severe meltdowns with a perceived injustice, we're talking about a kid who's having trouble regulating what their body is telling them from signals with the behavior that we find sort of appropriate or socially acceptable. So it's not a mystery and it's not a bad thing. It's not like oh my goodness, I can't believe you're one of those kids. It's more, how can I use the right parenting strategy to match my child's temperament so we're not constantly going like this? Because if I'm like, I'm just going to make the rules stricter and clearer, and my child's like, I just need more sensitivity and all of this feels too hard for me, we're going to get into that battle. And then our strategies aren't as successful. So we're always going to be doing what Tina Payne Bryson calls chasing the why. We're going to be really focused on why we're getting these big reactions or these habits that we're seeing, and then how we can help then get to the root of the cause. Okay, I keep going. 20. So why do toddlers love habits? This is going to sort of help provide the context for some of the things we're going to talk about. Well, developing brains love patterns and they love things that are predictable. You will have noticed your toddlers do the same things over and over and over and over again, and there is comfort in that. So when we've discovered something that gets a good reaction or feels really good, we're going to dig in. The toddler brain is not going to move flexibly to something else. It's going to really enjoy it. And those pathways, as we do them more and more and more, they become more solidified in our brain and they make it easier for us to get stuck in a habit. So parents always say, oh my goodness, we were just doing this for a little. Like he was sick. And so we were sleeping in bed. We were co-sleeping just for a little because he was so sick and it was so hard for me to go. And now all of a sudden, that's what he's used to, right? That happens really quickly. The good news is that that means we can also undo patterns really quickly because we can give them a new one in its place. Predictable habits can make kids feel control as everything feels new, as they're doing so much. They have new words, new adventures, new friendships. It can feel safe and secure to do something over and over and over again. That is a great example around picky eating. Where children can exert control, they will try to in order to help shore up and feel a little bit safer with all of the new stuff going on. That's one great reason that we see habits form. Toddlers are masters of imitation. Well, the way they learned that your phone was really important is because they watched you on it. It is not a developmental phenomenon that 2-year-olds run around trying to find your phone and hold it and hide it from you. That is learned behavior because they see what we're doing. So many of the habits our kids will pick up, I always say it's like one of the most horrifying stages of parenting when your kids start using your parenting back on you and you see like, oh my God, it was me who did that, right? Like I directly gave that to you. That can be where some of these come from. Then there's also that soothing sensory stimulation. We totally understand that a lot of these habits have to do with soothing patterns, and we're going to get into that in a second. A lack of impulse control. They just cannot resist. If that nail feels like it should be picked, they cannot not pick it, right? That is so powerful and strong for them. And then the attention. So you will know that whatever behaviors we talk about today, you probably have mentioned them to your child before. And the mentioning and the attention, whether it was positive or negative, is likely to increase a behavior. So we want to try, as one of our big takeaways from today, paying attention to the things we'd like to see more of and paying less attention to the things we'd like to go away. Because any amount of attention, even negative, that we bring to those things we want to go away over and over and over again is actually more likely to increase them. So we're going to do some of the habits that we took a guess at all the things that you're experiencing. Oh, nope, I'm going to do managing them first. Okay. Sorry, you were right. My brain was on the wrong side. These are just some of the key practical takeaways we'll start with, and then we can go through the specific behaviors. So we want to understand the why. I really want you to focus on what's motivating my child's behavior. If they are sucking their thumb, they need soothing in this moment. I have to know that if I'm going to talk to them about not sucking their thumb. By the way, all the thumb suckers here are going to let their kids suck their thumbs after today. We're going to feel good about thumb sucking. But in another example, maybe it's biting their nails and they're actually biting themselves to the point of bleeding. I'm going to understand what that soothing is about. And I'm going to think to myself, I can replace that and give my child something else to soothe them instead of the thing I don't want them to do. And that's offering an acceptable alternative. We're not taking away, we don't want to walk around taking away all the things that comfort our kids or all the patterns that they have for themselves, but we want to offer a different, acceptable alternative when we can. Focus on the positive is what I was mentioning, like increase dramatically the talk you do of things that were so helpful to you, that you love, that you want to see more of, because that praise will signal to their brains to do it again. You do need clear and consistent routines. Toddlers' brains thrive on routines. Knowing what comes next and being able to predict it is going to reduce anxiety and behavior, right? So if we're worried about our kids following through transitions in a day, we need to have really strong, clear transitions for them so that they have something to regulate themselves to. You are more likely to have trouble leaving the playground if there's an inconsistent message about how long we spend here, right? 5 minutes doesn't mean anything to your toddler. One of my favorite play date memories with my daughter when she was young was her and her friend. I was talking to the mom. I was busy in conversation, which I know feels like you can't imagine me doing that. And I said, okay, 5 more minutes. And my daughter turns to her friend. They were 5 years old. And she said, don't worry, my mom has a really long 5 minutes. Right? So we need structure and routines about how we do things so our kids can anticipate what that looks like. We're going to ignore some of the annoying behaviors if they're safe, things that we can just not give attention to. We can sometimes prompt for the opposite. So something like whining, we can just say, I'm so sorry. I'm happy to help you when you ask me a different way. But I'm not going to say every single time, no whining, not that voice, can't hear that voice, not that voice, or imitate them back, or any of the other things that we might be trying that are just bringing more attention. We're going to try to ignore that and just ask for what we want. We need those clear and simple limits, as I mentioned. We need to offer co-regulation. So when our children's nervous systems can't do everything they need to do to filter through, they need ours. And they need to literally borrow our calm. So I want you to think that one of the most important ways that you can model for your children how to be good at self-regulation is to get good at self-regulation yourself. If you can model the calm, they will come to you. As humans, social creatures, we regulate to each other. Emotions are contagious, right? Anxiety is contagious. When you're with somebody where you pick up on all those feelings, you can start to feel that yourself. So if you are the calm, then your child has somewhere to go to you. Being a good role model, thinking through what you're doing in terms of habits and self-regulation. Obviously, if your habit is to throw things on the floor, it will not be a surprise when your toddler does. If your habit is to curse, you're not going to be surprised when your toddler does, right? These are some of the things that we know they're picking up from imitation. Providing enough sensory outlets, making sure that our children do have enough ways to get out some of those feelings, to feel soothed by them. So that could be all kinds of things, like creating a little calm down corner where they can throw themselves into a beanbag. It might be a weighted blanket or a weighted toy. It might be a fidget spinner. It might be something they can chew that isn't their fingernails. But thinking through what they need in terms of sensory soothing and finding that acceptable replacement. And then patience. Many of these habits will not be there forever. My children are 10 and 13. They have a whole new set of annoying habits that I'm happy to talk to you about. But a lot of the ones we worried about in toddler years are gone. And that is the way development goes. So one moment in time is not the best measurement of sort of like, oh my God, this is going to be with us forever. You're going to be going to college sucking your thumb, as opposed to in this moment, this is something you need from it. I'm not that worried about it. We're eventually going to get to a different place. And as with most things in parenting, whichever comes first, you get too fed up with it as a parent, or your child gets fed up with it, and something's going to move on, right? And sometimes that's what we need to take us to the next step. Okay, now I think it's our long list. No, still not. Routines. I mentioned routines before. Routines help us to anticipate, help us to plan. If anyone has questions about how to have a routine that helps with some of these behaviors, happy to do it. But for example, if you're seeing more bedtime struggles, routines are going to be the number one thing we want to dig into to try to reduce some of that habit you've gotten in around these bedtimes where we're constantly fighting with each other. Okay, next, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of these and just some top thoughts on each of them. They're not all informed by research because we don't spend a ton of time researching like hair twirling, but we can talk about what we think the why might be behind some of these behaviors and then whether we feel like we need to get worried about them. So picky eating, I know some of you had mentioned that on the chat back when I could see the chat. And it is a very, very common and annoying behavior. Is it something that you have to be super worried about? No. But is it something that you can start accommodating accidentally and make much worse? Yes. So I know you just had another talk all on picky eating, but just as some of the guideposts, picky eating is about control. It's about your kids wanting to exert control where they can. Very, very, very rarely is it actually about taste. And so our best advice is to keep eating and what's served as an adult decision. So you decide what the menu is, you put out all of the choices, and your child decides which part or any part of that they eat. Does that mean they might eat less when they reject something? Absolutely. Nutrition is measured over a week. We're not really worried about kids unless we have a medical concern. We're not worried about them starving themselves because they refuse to eat something at dinner. But we're not going to become a short order cook or start asking them to decide what they want to eat as a response to picky eating, or it's going to get worse. So in many of our battles of control, we need to hold our line so that our child moves on to something else, which is to say, we need to up all the ways they feel powerful and autonomous in other ways, giving them jobs, giving them things to do. We don't want to make that battle around food. Bedtime struggles. Tight, tight, tight routine around bedtime struggles. That is one of the places where your children smell your weakness, right? Maybe you've been working all day, you just got home, you have this limited amount of time. They know the things that get you to stay in that room. The one more book, one more story, sing me a song, lay with me. These are hard to say no to as parents. But if we don't have a structure, nope, we only do 2 books, right? We only sing a song. I only lay here for 10 minutes. Things that make it really clear in a schedule. And you might need a picture schedule of what happens at bedtime that you reinforce with your child every night. But that is not a habit we want to get into and stay with. If your bedtime is a 2-hour routine, we've got to change that habit now so that we can continue to move through bedtime. You're going to have other children, have different jobs, move, other things that make it impossible to maintain that. God forbid you want to go out for dinner one night and not be home for bedtime, right? You will notice that those habits might be worse for you than they are for anyone else. If someone else puts them to bed, they go right away. And with you, this habit has become this dance. So that's where we want to go back to routine, and we want to shore up what we are offering, how long we're offering it for, and have some clear limits. Thumb sucking and pacifier. So this is one that has a great research behind it, which is that kids who suck things are less stressed. They reduce their cortisol level by producing more oxytocin, the love hormone. They are doing incredible self-soothing by sucking. Does it bother you? Absolutely. May they need orthodontics? Definitely. You know what? My kids didn't suck their thumb and they still needed braces and retainers and all the other things. So I'm going to say, if your pediatrician, your dentist bring it up to you, that's a different place. But the sucking itself, we are not worried about. They are getting a tremendous amount of soothing. What's the exception? Okay, no pacifiers outside of the crib or bed at all, ever during the day. We don't need to give them the habit of sucking when they're out and they could be speaking their feelings so that they're learning to actually express themselves. That's harder with a thumb. But even with a thumb during the day, we can say, hey, could you take your thumb out so I can hear what you want to say to me? Or can we talk about how you're feeling right now? Or can we engage in a conversation with our older kiddos while they're sucking their thumb and they're awake? You might also notice when they're sucking their thumb, hey, I wonder if they're feeling a little bit tired. I wonder if they're feeling a little bit like this day has been too much. I wonder if it's too loud or too noisy. What else is it trying to communicate that they need soothing? Same with the hair twirling. And by hair twirling, I mean this movement, if you can see me, where it becomes like a dreadlock and it's one place that we've done over and over and over again. Same, same. Usually a sign of fatigue as we are trying to wind down. It feels good. If you are cutting it out and really worried about it, then you could get to a place of what else could I offer you in this calm down period that feels good to do. So what other sensory feedback would feel good for you? And then you can try. There are a million different options to get that in. I know we're running up on time. I'm going to go faster to get in other alternates. Masturbation. Happy to talk about masturbation if any of you have toddlers, usually that are doing this. Usually this is like rubbing up on a coffee table, on the corner of the table, beginning to explore themselves in the bath, learning that it feels good to touch themselves. All of that totally developmentally appropriate. the difference between happening in public and private is where I would go after, as opposed to saying not to do it at all, which is to talk about, I know that feels good. It can be really surprising when you can touch your own body and feel really good. I understand that. That's something that we're going to do at home, and we're not going to do right now when we're sitting in the playground, right? But really understanding what that interest is about developmentally takes the sting out of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. Nose picking, good luck with nose picking. It's around for a really long time. And actually, when I moved to Los Angeles, I was a New Yorker who never drove a car. I moved to Los Angeles. I started driving. I pull up at stoplights and adults pick their nose all the time at stoplights. I didn't know this as a thing. Like, I just watch adults picking their nose all the time. So part of this is like, do your kids know how to blow their nose? Do they have a particular amount of boogers? Can we get them to pick their nose in a way that we're okay with, like taking a tissue and picking their nose, or using a Q-tip and showing them how you can help clean out their nose if that's it? And also not eating your boogers, which is a different level than picking their boogers. So it might be like, hey, you're picking your nose. What I don't need you to do is eat them. I dug into science. I spent a long time explaining to my son about all of the germs that were caught in his nose that we didn't need to eat because its nose was doing its job. And then we decided to get all our boogers out, and we could look at them and we could say, oh my goodness, thank you, boogers, for collecting all of the germs that we didn't want to make us sick. So we are not going with the impulse. It is irritating to pick their nose for sure, but we're really trying to work on the worst case scenario of the eating of all the boogers or the doing it everywhere and wiping it on people, that kind of behavior. Nail biting, I covered a little bit. It's similar to just needing a replacement. Head banging is a tough one. Normal developmental phase, generally between 12 and 18 to 24 months early on, when kids don't have as much language. It gets a ton of attention, and so parents respond to it like that. One of the best things to do, because it's very rare that kids actually hurt themselves, is just to interrupt, put your hand there while they're banging and say, hey, I can tell you're super frustrated. What do we need? So we just name the feeling and we get to what we can do about it rather than dealing with the head banging itself. Biting, spitting, hitting, kicking, all the same thing. We want to go with the why. Most of your toddlers, we don't talk about aggression. We're not hitting because we're angry. We're hitting for any number of reasons. 2-year-olds like to walk by each other and smack each other as a way to say hello. So we're going to go with the why. What did they need from the hitting or the biting? Like, hey, it was so hard to take a turn. Next time you can say mine and we'll know to switch. Or you can say help and I will help you, as the way that we get in front of that lizard behavior. It is always faster to bite or spit or hit. That is that lizard reaction. And so all we're saying is the reaction isn't wrong. It does stink when someone takes your stuff, but there's something else we can do instead of that hitting or biting. Or wanting your attention. If they're hitting you for attention, teaching them to say, mama, help. Then you'll look up, right? And then you'll pay attention, and you don't need to be smacked in order to do it. Interrupting, we can teach them a better way to interrupt. So it is very hard for them to hold information in their minds for an extended period. So actually, give me a second, wait till I'm done. Then you have the kids who are like, I forgot. I don't remember what, right? It's so devastating that they don't even remember what they wanted to say. And there are some great stand-up comics who do like the skits about, you're in the middle of nowhere and you finally pull over and you're like, yes, yes, yes. What did you need? And then they say the most ridiculous, mundane thing. And you're like, that's what you had to interrupt all of this for? Like this word of wisdom from you? But it really is hard. So finding a way you want to be interrupted, saying, hey, if mommy's talking to her friend, I want you to tap on my arm and then I'll ask you what it is. Or thank you for telling me. I can't help with that right now. And you do the pause and the delayed gratification, but you have the interruption. As our kids get older, we can do things like, okay, hold it for 5 seconds. I'm going to finish this. Okay, tell me what it is, and practice the time that they're actually able to do that. For me, with older kids, I started having them do Post-its where it was like, put something that you need to tell me down when you can't interrupt me in a meeting. So we are always working on interrupting, even as they get older. It's really that ability to wait and to remember what they had to say. Okay, that was so many, and I know I'm at 40 minutes, so we're going to stop. Maybe we can close the screen share and I can attempt to see humans or the chat. And I'd love to help with questions.
What?
Okay. Oh, there you go.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, as an educator, but also a parent, I feel like I also have a lot more tools now in my toolbox to support my toddlers and all toddlers. So thank you so much just for sharing that. Just a reminder, please drop your questions into the chat. I know we have a few, and we're going to go through a couple more while we still have Mariel. In the meantime, Mariel, I'm just going to go over just a couple of questions that we also
Great.
got before the webinar. Um,
Super.
the first one is it ever too late to curb a bad habit? I've allowed my child to carry her stuffy everywhere she goes for so long, and now I just don't know if I could take it away.
So that's a great question. It's never too late because we're always learning. I would say my personal feeling is about 3 days to break a habit in terms of like three hard days. If you don't want to carry the stuffy, or you don't want her to carry the stuffy anymore, you might need a transitional object on the way. What can she carry that does that same thing? So I'm a big, like, I gave on the first day of preschool where I didn't know how we were going to separate. And my daughter was like, I need something. I gave her my hair thing. And I was like, this is your magic rubber band that you have of mommies all day long. So this might be one of those examples where we can say about the stuffy, you know what? We're not going to bring our stuffy anywhere anymore because stuffy's getting really dirty, because stuffy's getting a lot of germs on him, because everywhere we go, it doesn't allow a stuffy. So we're going to do something else instead. And depending on the age of your child, you could maybe involve them in what they're going to pick. You know, a Lego piece in their pocket or a photo that they carry around might do just as well and help bridge that gap. And then eventually we would get to like, we don't need to carry anything around, right? And our kids would move on. But if you lost it, you know, people always ask me, like, should I buy 100 of these things in case I lost it or something terrible happened or the stuffing started coming out? It's actually a great opportunity to also be like, we have other skills we can do to support you through this really hard thing. So we would give her a lot of support, like losing that stuffy is hard, and also saying we know how to do hard things and we have all these other ways we can sort of grow that capacity to be soothed. On the other hand, if you wait and you don't care, eventually she'll stop bringing her stuffy everywhere. So that's not one where I feel like if you didn't want to, I don't think there's an urgent rush to need to curb it.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. This is another really good question. It's how can I handle judgment from others about my child's perceived bad habits? I know my mother-in-law thinks it's terrible that my son still sucks his thumb, but it doesn't bother me at all, and I know he'll stop in time. What should I tell her?
Oh, such a good one. We can never parent for an audience, right? Like it is just impossible that you could be doing things you believe in and feel good about and have everybody else in the world agree with you. So when it's your mother-in-law, and maybe you can't shut off the noise the way you can if you're following any accounts that make you feel badly about yourself, I would really just simply explain to her once, like, I absolutely understand that it bothers you. I'm not that worried about it and I feel okay about it. And after you've said that one time, you just have to ignore her. And you have to let her be entitled to her opinion about how much it drives her crazy and maybe even what she says to your child, because we can't also run constant interference where, you know, grandma says, like, take that thumb out of your mouth, and we're like, actually, mom, it's okay with us, we're really happy for the thumb. You know, we can't do that every single time. So we maybe hear it and then we say to our child, this is one great way where your relationship really, like, you know, is above all others. And you say to your child, I know grandma talks about your thumb a lot, but I'm okay with your thumb. If you need to suck your thumb, it's okay with me. And if it's working for you, it's okay with me for you to keep doing it. And you make that okay, even if they're hearing from other people that they don't like that behavior. But try as much as you can to quiet the judgment from others, which is going to come, you know, no matter what you do, and to really feel like if it is something you feel good about, that is the only thing that matters.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got one more question for you, and then I'm gonna
Great.
throw it over to the chat. Can you also touch a little bit about maybe dangerous habits or habits that might need intervention? Someone said, I've had friends with children who bang their heads on the ground to soothe themselves, or have body tics. How do you know when it's time to call an expert?
That's a great question. You can always ask any of these habits, you can ask your pediatricians about if you feel concerned about them. Something like tics, for example, we do a lot of ignoring of tics. They're very normal in development. And so there's not actually generally a reason for more intervention, but that would be a great thing to mention to your pediatrician when you're noticing them. right? The head banging is the same. There's not a whole lot we do, but it's still important that you say them out loud and that you talk to somebody about them. People who know your children, like the people at Vivvi that you're seeing them every day, are going to also help you understand where some of these habits fit in. Like, do they happen around a certain time of day? Do they happen all the time? Do they seem like they can be controlled? Do they seem like they can't be controlled? Right. And that's all going to help us as clinicians make a determination whether something is more serious. Anything that feels like it's interfering with their activities of daily life, like their ability, if they, for example, they are so scared of dogs that they need to cross the street and they can no longer walk to school in the morning because there are dogs and that prevents them from doing it. Or a tic is so strong that it's really hard for them to concentrate or pay attention to anything else because it's taking over. Those are the kinds of things we want to make sure we bring up. And so usually I would say the threshold is when you know it's interfering with everyday life, or when you feel like maybe it's something I just need to check with everyone about how often they're seeing it and understand its frequency. But almost everything in child development is about how often we're seeing it, how much it's interfering with everything going on, and then whether or not there's another explanation for what it might be revealing or if it's just a behavior, right? So that's kind of the system we use to discover.
Thank you, Mariel. I'm going to throw it over to the chat if you feel like there's anything else you want to share. I know Anna, a little bit earlier before we got started, mentioned that there's something that's frustrating her, is her child is kind of doing the opposite of what they want them to do, such as putting on clothes, washing hands, time to leave the playground. Any tips for that?
So I don't know if those are all habits as much as like welcome to toddlerhood, right? Like the desire to do the opposite of what everyone wants you to do is so strong and so appealing and sometimes hilarious and sometimes maddening, right? For the playground, really concrete tips. So 5 more pushes on the swing, 3 more times up the slide. Maybe you use a timer if your kids are into that, right? There are even timers you can give to them. So, like when it starts beeping, they can hear the beeping, or an hourglass timer where they can watch the sand, but really concrete ways to leave the playground. And you might still need an incentive to make that easier. So, like, hey, if we get in the stroller now to get home, we can stop and, buy fruit on the way home for dinner. Whatever the thing is that gets them moving. So, it's not like you can't pair a difficult transition with what's coming next. On the getting dressed, those are also areas where you need a tight routine. So some kids do better. They wake up in the morning, they get entirely dressed in one movement, so we don't have to come back to it later. Other kids, it might be more like I involuntarily dress you while you're doing something else. For other kids, that timer might still work in the morning. So I would figure out what is a routine that helps make those moments, because all of the ones, I forgot what the other one was, but the getting dressed and the playground are transition moments, right? And so transitions generally do well with a little picture chart or a little routine that we've nailed down, and then some accommodation for what else your child is doing that helps make that easier. And maybe the habit, sorry, Kat, I'm going to keep talking, but maybe the habit is actually the argument you get in with your child. And we want to make sure if we're in like that loop, where like every morning is awful because I scream and then he screams and then he throws something and then, we just go that, then break that habit and do a reset and just say, and the benefit of your kids being a little bit older is that you can say to them something like, I don't want to fight in the morning anymore. I want to try getting dressed and have us all get along and have so much fun so we can get out the door and get to school and everybody's in a great mood. And say it. And then really use that as an opportunity to say, I'm not going to have the same fights I have every morning. I'm not going to do the same thing I'm doing every morning because it's not working. I'm willing to try to change it up. And that can be some of the habit we get stuck in. I don't know, Kat, if you feel like you get in a rut. I feel like I get in those ruts where I'm having the same fight over and over. And I'm like, somebody's got to just move on. Otherwise, we're never going to get out of this.
I do. When it comes to picking out clothes in the morning, I start with two choices. It's A
Yeah.
or B, and after a while, mommy's deciding.
100%. You can't make a choice. Mommy decides. We used to do clothes the night before for one of my kids because it was just impossible in the morning. And it was like, I'm sorry, you don't want to wear that the next day, but that's what we agreed last night, right? And don't be afraid of a tantrum when you're going to enforce a limit. It's okay for them to tantrum back. You can still hold the line, right? So we're not into getting our kids to be compliant with everything. They're not going to love all our rules, but it's about supporting them sensitively through having to follow some rules.
Thank you, Mariel. I know we've we're a little over time. There's just one more thing. Leah mentioned that she's struggling with picky eating. I know you touched base. Is there anything else you want to share or add to this?
I think really just about the allowing your child to choose what from your choices they eat. Having one win in a meal is generally a good policy. So if you're like, I know they'll always eat rice and the other things might be unfamiliar, but we'll have the rice there, and then feeling okay about that. All of our research around food is really that the more we get into this like begging around one bite or one food group or one thing more, we tend to make a lot of the rigidity worse. So it's also really important time to think about the modeling. As we mentioned, we should be eating all our meals together whenever possible, which doesn't mean it has to be you, but if you have a caregiver, if they're at daycare, it's like wonderful times for them to sit with other people. But we want to eat meals in a social way so that we watch what other people are eating. That has been shown to not only increase the variety in our diet and our healthy eating, but also to help with some of the annoying behaviors that we get around picky eating, right? Because if I'm watching someone else eat their peas, I'm like, oh, maybe I should try that pea, right? And so it's positive peer pressure in that way. So as much as we can be eating with our child at the table, oh, there's some more resources there with our child at the table and allowing them the freedom to decide what they choose from our menu, the better. No power struggles, no bribery, no begging, really just riding through it and remembering that the more you can be calm and regulated, the more likely they are to come around to some of the foods in the future.
Well, thank you again. I think that was super helpful for me. Also, my child is a super picky eater, but I have to say, there's some days she really surprises me and she's always like, "What's that? Can I try it?" And then she'll make the choice herself.
Yeah.
I'm okay with.
Absolutely. You just keep offering. And I know food waste is so hard, which is why if you're all eating the same thing, it doesn't feel so wasteful to be like, I just made this whole salmon and you wouldn't take a bite. At least you can eat it. But it is really true. Keep offering and they change their minds very quickly.
They certainly do. So I think that's it. We went through all the questions, but check in the chat for everyone who attended today. Mariel was amazing. Jessica also posted, there's a webinar that we did recently all about picky eating. So if you still have some questions about it, I recommend check this out. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Any last words, Mariel?
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm so sorry for my technical issues, and I'm thrilled to be here. And reach out anytime. I think Jessica just put my email in the chat. Thank you. She's doing all my agent work for me today. But feel free to reach out anytime if I can be helpful at all. And thank you all for being here and making time on a Thursday. I forgot what day of the week it was, which is the real sign of parenting exhaustion, right?
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you at the next webinar.